Hello and welcome to my thoughts on the first 423 chapters of Bleach, which for those of you who don't know it off the top of your head, which I wouldn't blame you, encompasses the Substitute Shinigami arc, the Soul Society arc, and the Arrancar arc, or if you want to split it up, I suppose that would be the Arrancar arc, followed by the Huikomondo arc, followed by the Fake Karakura Town arc. I know some people like to do it that way, but I like to keep it simple. So yeah, since a little bit before the new Bleach one-shot released, which I already made a video about, go and check that out if that interests you. And in fact I also made another video about what Bleach means to me before I even began this reread, so that's another video for you to go and check out if you're interested. Before the one-shot came out, I decided to reread the series because I discovered the Shonen Jump manga subscription, which is £2 a month, and you can go and read entire series such as Bleach, Naruto, Dragon Ball, stuff like that. It's actually really good. I wouldn't recommend reading it at your PC, but the app itself, just like having a page on at a time and swiping from right to left, is great. It's not perfect because sometimes you get double page spreads, but it's not the end of the world. You can kind of swipe back and forth and get the big picture, or you can, I believe you can have it so there's 2 pages up on the screen at a time if that's more your style, but it's a really good way of reading manga and just blitzing through it, and it really is like a dream come true as someone who had to rely on fan scanlations in the past and websites which were a bit shady or didn't always have all of the chapters and stuff like that. Not that I'm dissing those sites, by the way. They provided an excellent service that Viz Media did not at that particular point in time, so it was really good of them to do that. I know they worked really hard on providing that service for people. So yeah, I decided to make this video at this point because it seems to me like there's 2 kind of main halves to Bleach. There's the Aizen half and there's the Iwak half, right? Oh my god, I'm gonna have to get used to pronouncing that. Hopefully in the future we can say that there's thirds to Bleach, and the third one will be a Hell arc, but we've still not heard anything about that, which is kind of a shame. That being said though, I've had such a blast rereading Bleach. My original experience with Bleach, and this was my first ever anime, I started watching it as an anime, and I got up to around about the Ichigo versus Ulquiorra final fight. I think that's when it was, and that's where the anime had gotten up to at that point, and then I think there was a filler arc or something, and I remember I was like, I need to keep going, this is getting too good, so I found the original source material in the manga and I read it from there onwards. I think the manga at that particular point was just up to around the time when Daiga Ichigo was arriving on the scene to fight Aizen. Correct me if I'm wrong, you can go back and find that if you want, it's not important, but just to give you some kind of context. And from that point onwards I would read the manga weekly and watch Bleach weekly until it ended. I bring this up because I think there's a distinct difference between reading something week to week versus reading something in binge reading it, because week to week you have the speculation, the I wonder what's going to happen next, the discussion with other people about what's going on, the critiques of the story so far colouring your expectations of the story moving forward, stuff like that. Whereas when you're just binge reading it, it really is like pure story coming at you. There's no, like, I mean, yeah, there's cliffhangers, but it's not done in a way that's overtly annoying or anything like that. There's no pauses is what I'm saying. It feels like how it's meant to be read, and that exact reason is why I'm so excited to read through the 1000-Year Blood War arc coming up, because I read that week to week and people had lots of discussions and criticisms about that at the time, and I'm really interested to see how it reads just straight from start to finish. But as for this reread, I'm fairly familiar with the very first arc, the Substitute Shinigami arc, because I've tried to get back into the anime a couple of times over the last few years, but my attention span sucks and I've not had the kind of hyper interest in Bleach that this kind of re-emergence of it has given me recently. And also I didn't necessarily read it in manga form, or I did, but I was collecting it physically because I didn't know the Shonen Jump subscription existed, and I probably will continue to collect it physically because I love it so much. And there's just something about physical manga, man. It's so nice to just have it in front of you as a book. I own the first 15 volumes physically, but with that restriction lifted, it was nice to just be able to binge through it without having to worry about throwing down it's somewhere between £8 to £12 for every omnibus edition going forwards. I guess going through it then, I would say the Substitute Shinigami arc is really good as an introduction to the characters. There's certain fights in it I don't particularly love. I don't love the issues where Chad and Orihime get their powers. I don't find that particularly interesting. I like them as characters and I like their powers, but for whatever reason I just didn't enjoy their origin stories. They felt, I can't even explain why. They just felt like a sidetrack, and maybe it's because that entire arc was so focused on Ichigo as a character and how he's growing in power and how these more difficult hollows are approaching him and his day-to-day life with Rukia, that it just kind of felt like, anyway, now for something completely different. And when I was like, no, tell me more of the main story, please. Obviously this would be something that would happen more and more as Bleach went forwards, but not in a way that was always as annoying as I remembered it being anyway. It's interesting to see the early stages of Bleach lore. There are people who will die on the hill of telling you that Kubo planned out every single little intricacy of Bleach from the very beginning, but it is very clear from reading the first arc that he didn't, which is fine. It's a very big world, it's a very long series. You would have to be insane to plan out that entire story and stick to it 100%. It's just little idiosyncrasies like Menos Grands requiring like the strongest Shinigami around to take them out, when later on well, actually, to be fair, that was something that was kind of exacerbated by the anime a little bit, because in the anime there were scenes of lieutenant class characters just cutting down Menos's like there was no tomorrow, like they were paper, and that isn't actually something that really shows up in the original source material. There's a moment in the Fate Karakura Town arc where a big hollow dude comes along and vomits out a bunch of Menos Grands, and then the Vizards turn up and deal with them, but the Vizards are super strong characters, so it kind of adds up. But there's some stuff such as the 13 Court Guard squads have different names for things in the first few times that they're mentioned, as opposed to, captains and lieutenants and stuff like that. To be fair, actually, I don't think they're called lieutenants in the official manga translation. They're called assistant captains. But yeah, it was only mildly distracting, and it's all stuff that you can kind of fit in with the stuff that comes later. Like, it's a little bit of a squeeze, but it there's nothing grossly out there which is completely different. It's also interesting to go back and see Kubo's earlier art. It's definitely less refined than it becomes, although at the point I got to before stopping to record this, his art looks as good as it's ever been, but I can't ever put my finger on a time when I noticed it changing, which is kind of a way that art evolution goes. But if you compare the final Aizen arc, I guess it's not really the Aizen arc, but you know what I mean, if you compare the final issue of 400 or something that I just read versus issue 1, it looks very different. It looks a lot rougher, and you can kind of see that when there's flashback scenes. Like, the first time Byakuya is introduced, he kind of looks like his facial structure is almost chibi, except it's not cutesy, but like, you know what I mean, it's kind of smaller than it should be. I think the thing that feels like the biggest U-turn to me is Renji's reaction to when he first sees Rukia in the world of the living, and he's so hell-bent on killing her, and you could argue that it's all an act and that he's trying to intimidate her and stuff like this, but it doesn't add up to the Renji that we see later on in the series, even near the start of the Soul Society arc. So it's that's one thing about this series that's always kind of bothered me, and this reread didn't really smooth that over. Like, I get that it had been decades since they last saw each other, but that really didn't come across. That was more like later knowledge that I already had. One thing that surprised me through the duration of this reread was just how much I liked Ichigo as a character. Something that kind of got lost on me over the years, or maybe it's something that happened during the 1000-Year Blood War arc, was I kind of grew to see Ichigo as this kind of non-protagonist of just a guy with the strong powers, with a very handy DNA of all the different kind of races in that, is it races, I guess, or the different powers in that universe, and a bit of a Mary Sue at points, and he kind of, and I will admit, later on in the Arrancar arc, he does fall into this trap of, I can do this, oh I got beat, oh I'm really depressed, wait I'm motivated, I'm gonna train, I can do this, oh I got beat, oh I'm really demotivated, oh I'm depressed, oh I'm, it kind of goes on that cycle a few times too many. But there's definitely more to him than that, and rereading the series from front to at least the point I'm at now has reignited my love for Ichigo. I think it's also because, in comparison to Naruto, Naruto is such like a strong character, and he has a lot of philosophy that he talks about, and his motivations are so well explored that Ichigo, in comparison, doesn't quite feel as I don't know how to say it, as fleshed out. And for God's sake, if you're one of those people who still calls people who like Naruto Narutards in 2021, and get a better hobby. I've noticed that's still a thing in some areas of Bleach discussion. I'm like, Jesus Christ, is it still 2007? Haven't we learned that you can love more than one story? Oh my god. I think Ichigo's progression of power through the Soul Society arc will always be something that's just so much fun to watch happen, because it's so hard fought, or hard won, I guess. Like, he never just defeats someone easily and then moves on to the next one. He kind of loses in a lot of areas, in a lot of ways. I was thinking earlier about how often Ichigo ends up like near death after a fight that he ostensibly wins, and whether that's kind of a bad thing, but I don't think it is. It just goes to show how like he's clawing for power just to get onto the same level as the next opponent that he's facing, and how difficult his strife is throughout the series. Before I forget to mention it, one thing that really stood out to me during this reread of the manga is just how good the art is. It's so good. There are so many panels where I just stop and go, oh, that looks so fucking cool. Not just Ichigo, but all of the characters, they all have badass moments of, I guess not all of them, but most of them. Like, I'm not a huge Ishida fan. Ishida's fine. He's just fine. But there are panels where he shows up and you're like, whoa, Ishida's cool today. It honestly makes me want to learn how to draw. Like, it really does. There are two things at the minute that are really inspiring me to learn how to draw, and one of them is this. So, I might just have to get on that at some point instead of constantly saying that. But yeah, panels where Ichigo reveals his Shikai for the first time, or where he reveals his Bankai for the first time, they are iconic. They are so good. I do think there are some things that the anime excels at. I think that, for instance, when Ichigo pulls on his hollow mask, it looks really cool in the anime because there's the motion, there's the rise in music, there's stuff like that. I think there's stuff that the anime really does enhance, but there's also stuff that the anime does much worse, and that's for instance the censorship of some of the stuff. Like, people get cut in half way more often in the manga, wounds are inflicted like more mortally, I guess would be the way of saying that, in the manga. I was struck when rereading this as just how dark the manga can get when it comes to how people get wounded. It makes me hope that the rumour around the 1,000-year Blood War arc taking place at a later time slot in Japan is true, because then we can really kind of keep things at source material levels. I could go through the Rancor arc and all of the story beats and everything, but I think I laid out that kind of thing in my video, what Bleach means to me. I think I would be retreading a lot of the same ground there, but like, just to kind of wrap up this video, like, just the reading through the manga, if you haven't done it in a while, it's such a good idea to just go and reread it, or read it for the first time. If you've watched the anime but you've never read the manga, and you're thinking, you know, besides the 1,000-year Blood War arc, you might be thinking like, oh, I don't really know if it's worth reading the first few hundred issues of the manga. If you've got the time, it really is. It's just such a good experience. The anime doesn't change too much besides the filler arcs. There's a few things that the filler arcs ruin in terms of pacing. Even if you skip them, they kind of insert a few things in kind of, like, especially the end of this arc, the Rancor arc, the way Ichigo loses his powers. Luckily, I read the manga version first. He loses his powers after defeating Aizen. He goes into a coma for a month, which I forgot. Holy shit. He wakes up and he's losing the last dregs of his power, and he says goodbye to Rukia. In the show, he loses his powers very slowly, because it goes into a filler arc where he's just getting weaker throughout the entirety of the arc, and then he does final Getsuga Tenshu, which is just a regular one against a hollow, which he should have been able to stomp easily otherwise, and then he loses his powers, and it doesn't quite hit the same. So I definitely recommend reading the manga and seeing where it differs, and you'll find that a lot of it is the same, but by the end of it, like, the kind of experience of the pacing and the way the manga plays out is better in a lot of ways. So far, my reread has made me want to read mangas of popular anime before I watch the anime, like, to see how it was originally intended to be seen. So I think I've already mentioned I want to read the Dragon Ball manga. I don't know how different that will be, but I know the original Dragon Ball Z anime has a lot of pacing issues. Also, I know there's a Dragon Ball anime before Dragon Ball Z. I know the story takes place on a much smaller scale for a while before it gets to Super Saiyans and all of that. That's pretty much all I know about it, though. But yeah, I'm loving this app so much, this subscription. I cannot recommend it enough to people who like Bleach and Naruto and stuff like that. It's so good. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to my thoughts on the first 400 issues of Bleach. I know they weren't particularly comprehensive. This isn't like a 45-minute long video, but again, I would be retreading old ground because of my What Bleach Means to Me video. This is mostly just about observations I've made in this most recent rereading, so I will be back after I read The 1,000-Year Blood War, although I guess I have got the Fullbringer arc to reread first, but after that I'm super intrigued to see how I feel about the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, because I've forgotten so much of it, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, I read it weekly instead of getting to read it all at once. So yeah, I'll see you back here in probably about a month again for that. Until then, see you later, or maybe check out my channel for more videos on stuff like this. So